Our service on page 65.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan l'sech bina l'havkin ben yom u'ben laila. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asani b'tzamaho. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asani Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asani ben chorin. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam pakeach Ibrahim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam mabish arumim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam matir asurim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam zokef kefufim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam merkaharetz al hamayim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asali kol tzarkihi. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamechin mitzadei gaver. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam azei Yisrael b'gvura. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam atei Yisrael b'tifara. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hanatein le'yaif koach.
We may be seated.
U'tenenu hayom u'b'chol yom l'cheinu chesed u'rachamim b'einecha u'b'einei chol ro'einu v'tigmalenu chesedim tovim. Baruch atah Adonai gomel chesedim tovim le'amo Yisrael yiratzon le'kadecha. Ashreinu matov chokenu manayim goraleinu u'mayafa yerushatenu. Ashreinu she'anachnu mashkimim u'marivim. Erev avoker v'yomrim pamayim b'chol yom Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai echad. Kadesh et shemcha makdishei shemecha v'kadesh et shemcha ba'olamecha u'v'yishuatcha tarim b'tagbiya karnenu. Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh et shemcha ba'rabim.
Service continues, page 81.
Mizmor shir Chanukat habayit l'David. Hafachta mitzvidi l'macholi pitach tasaki v'tazreni simcha l'man yizamercha chavod v'lo yidom Adonai Elohai le'olam odeka.
Warner's Kaddish for those reciting, page 82. Please rise. Yigadal v'yikadash shemei Rabbi v'yalma divra kirute v'yamlich malchute v'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael b'agala v'zman kari v'imru. Amen. Yehei shmei Rabba mevarach le'olam ulamei almaya yiparach v'yishtabach v'yipa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei d'kudesha brichu Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran v'alma v'imru. Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. We rise on page 83 for Baruch Shamar.
Baruch Shamar v'hayaholam. Yachid Cheholamim Melech Mishubachim for Adei Shemo Hagadol Baruch atah Adonai Melech Mehulaha Batish Bachod Hodu Ladonai Kiruv Shmo Hodir Vamim Alilotah. Yikohem Elohei Hamim Elilim Vadonai Shamayim Asah. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu v'hishtachavu lahadam raglav kadoshu. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu v'hishtachavu lahar kodsho. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu. Tehurach mechaper l'neshvi. Adonai tzvaot imanu miskav lanu Elohei Yaakov Selah. Adonai tzvaot ashrei adam botech bach. Adonai Hoshia HaMelech Yanenu v'yom karenu. Hoshia et HaMelech. Ashrei Ha'am Shekachalo, Ashrei Ha'am Shadonai Elohav. Vani b'chastecha v'tachti yageli b'bishuratecha. Ashir al Adonai ki gamal alai. Amatzeach k'kol David. Yehu l'ratzanim reifi v'hagyon libi lefanecha. Adonai tzuri v'goali. LeDavid b'shanoto et kamo v'tavino. Hodeh Adonai nefesh avada v'lo yeshmeu pahachosim ba. Tefillah l'Moshe isha Elohim. V'hinom Adonai Eloheinu aleinu u'maseh yadeinu konena aleinu u'maseh yadeinu konenehu yoshev b'seker elyon b'tzel Shaddai yitlona. Orach yamim asbiehu v'arehu b'shuati. Orach yamim asbiehu v'arehu b'shuati. Hallelujah, hallelujah, Shem Adonai, hallelujah, de Adonai. Beit Yisrael Baruch et Adonai, Beit Aharon Baruch et Adonai, Beit HaLevi Baruch et Adonai, Yirei Adonai Baruch et Adonai, Baruch Adonai Mitzion, Shochin Yerushalayim, Hallelujah.
We rise as the service continues on 92.
Hodu Adonai Ki Tov, Ki Le'olam Chasdo. Noten lachem l'chol basar, ki le'olam chasto, hodu le'el hashamayim, ki le'olam chasto.
You may be seated.
Rananu tzadikim baranai, laisharim navatihila. Nafshenu hiktal Adonai ezrenu maginenu ki vo yismach libenu ki b'shem kodsho v'atachnu yehi chastecha Adonai aleinu kasher yichalnu lach mizmor shir leyom hashabbat. O Genuvon Beseva, Deshenim Verananim Yihu, Lahagid Ki Ashar Adonai, Tzuri V'Lavla Tabo, Adonai Malach Geut Lavesh. Eidotecha nemnu me'od levecha nava kodesh, Adonai le'orech yamim. Yehi chevod Adonai le'olam, Yismach Adonai v'ma'asav. V'hurachum yechaper avon v'lo yashchit, v'hirba lahashiva po v'lo ya'ir kol chamato. Adonai Hoshia HaMelech Yanenu v'yom kareinu. Ashrei shevetecha Jehallalucha Selah. Yehi lat Adonai Yedaber Pi v'varech kol basar shem kodsho le'olam va'ed. V'anachnu nevarech Yameh Taviad Olam. Hallelujah. 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 Nafshi et Adonai. Adonai shomeret gerim yatom v'amana ye'oded v'derech r'shaim ye'aved imloch Adonai le'olam Elohayach Tzion l'dor v'ador. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Ki tov zamer Eloheinu ki na'im naba tehillah. Magid divarav Yaakov, Chukav v'mishpatav Yisrael, Lo asach chen l'chol goy u'mishpatim bal yida'un. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Hallelujah Adonai min hashamayim. Hallelujah b'amromim. Vayarim karen le'amo tehillah l'chol chasidav. Livnei Yisrael am kirovo. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Shir al Adonai shir chadash. Tilato b'kal chasidim. Lesor malchehem bezikim v'nifbadehem b'chavlei varzel. Lasot bahem mishpat katuv. Hadarhu l'chol chasidav. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Hallelujah b'kodsho. Hallelujah b'rkiya uzo. Hallelujah v'tziltzilei shama. Hallelujah v'tziltzilei teruah. Kol hanshama tehallel hallelujah. Kol hanshama tehallel hallelujah. Baruch Adonai le'olam, amen v'amen. Uvaruch shem kavodo le'olam, v'yimalei kavodo et kol haaretz. Amen v'amen.
We rise as the service continues, 101.
Vayavarech David et Adonai le'nei kol hakahal, vayomer David. Atahu Adonai Elohim, asher b'karta ba'Avram v'hotzei tomeor kasdim, v'samta shemo Avraham, u'matzata et levavo ne'eman lefanecha, v'charot iman b'hi. Hayam bakata lifnehem v'yavru v'toch hayam b'yavasha v'et rodfehem hishlachta v'imtzolot kamo even b'mayim aziv. Vayosh Adonai b'yam hahu et Yisrael miyad Mitzrayim. Vayar Yisrael hayad hagadola asher asa Adonai b'Mitzrayim. Vayiru ha'am et Adonai. Vayaminu b'Adonai u'Moshe avdo. Az yashir Moshe b'nei Yisrael. Ki l'Adonai hamlucha Moshe b'goyim v'alu Moshe b'hartzion l'shparet ha'esa v'hayta l'Adonai hamlucha v'haya Adonai l'melech al kol haaretz b'yom hahu yeh Adonai echad u'shemo
May be
echad
seated, 104.
nishmat kol chai tivarech et shimcha. Mi yidmelach u'mi yishvelach u'mi yarach lach ha'el hagadol hagibor v'hanora el elyon karnei shamayim v'aretz nehalelcha u'shabechecha u'ferecha u'v'rechet shem kodshecha kamor leDavid barchi nafshi et Adonai v'chol karavai et shem kodsho ha'el b'tatzumot uzacha hagadol b'chvod shemecha Hagibor lanetzach v'hanora b'norotecha hamelech hayoshev al kisei ram v'nisad.
Our service will continue in the middle of page 100. Shochein had marom v'kadosh shemo v'chatuv rananu tzadikim. Befi sharim tit halal v'divrei tzadikim tit barach uvilashon chasadim tit romam uvakerev kedoshim tit kadash u'b'makalot ridavot amechabet Yisrael. Shekin chovat holitzrim lefanecha Adonai Eloheinu v'le'avodinu. להודות, להלל, לשבח, לפאר, לרומם, להדר, לברך, ליעלה ולקלס על כל דברי שירות ותשבחות. דוד בן ישי, עבדך משיחך.
Please rise.
ישתבח שמך לעד מלכנו, על המלך הגדול והקדוש בשמיים ובארץ. ברכות והודאות מעתה ועד עולם, ברוך אתה אדוני, אל מלך גדול בתשבחות, אל ההודעות אדון הנפלאות, הבוחר בשירי זמרה מלך, אלוהי העולמים. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, בעלמא דברה חירותי וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומכון וחיי כל בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב אמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבם מבורך לעולם ולעולמי עולמי, יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תשבחתה ונחמתה דמירם בעלמא ואמרו אמן. ברכו את אדוני המבורך, ברוך Adonai hamavorach leolam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam yotzer or uvorei choshech. Oseh shalom uvorei et hakol. Hakol yoducha v'hakol yeshabechucha v'hakol yomu ein kadosh kadonai. Ein ke'er kachadonai Eloheinu ba'olam hazeh ve'ein zulatecha malkeinu l'chayei ha'olam haba efes biltecha go'aleinu limot hamashiach ve'ein dom melecha moshienu litchiyat hametim el Adon al kol ha'ma'asim Baruch v'vorach b'fi kol neshama Godlo v'tuvo mahalei olam Dat utvuna hasovavimoto Hamidga achayot hakodesh v'nedar bechavod al hamerkava Zechutu mishor lifnei chiso Chesed v'rachamim lifnei chivodo Tovim meorot shebara Eloheinu yetzaram B'dat b'vina uv'haskel Koach ugvura natan bahem liot moslim bekerev tevel meleim ziv umafikim noga naezivam bechol haolam semechim betzetam besasim bevoam osim be'em avritzon konam v'yer v'chavod notnim lishmo Tzahalaverina lezecher malchuto Kara lashemesh vayizrachor Ravehit kihin tzurat halavana Shevach notnim lo Kol tzeva marom Tiferet ugedula Serafim ve'ofanim v'chayot HaKodesh la'el asher Shavat mikol ha'maasim b'yom hashvi. Titbarach Moshiach Shabbat Maseh Yedecha V'Yomer Shesli Mifuch Hasela Titbarach Tzurenu Malkeinu V'Goaleinu Borei Kedoshim Yishtabach Kulam ahuvim kulam berurim kulam giborim v'kulam osim be'ema uv'yiraretzon konam v'kulam potchim et bihem b'kedusha v'tohara b'shira v'zimra muvarchim v'mishabachim muvarim umaritzim umakdishim umamlechim et shem ha'el HaMelech HaGadol HaGibor v'Hanara Kadoshu v'chulam makablim alehem u'malchut shamayim zeh mezeh v'nutnim reshut zeh lazeh le'akdish le'otzram b'nachat ruach v'safa v'ruah v'nima kadosha kulam kecharonim v'omrim b'yirah kadosh 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 Adonai tzvaot melech kol haaretz kevodo Ve'ofanim v'chayot hakodesh B'rash gadol mitnasim liumat serafim liumatam meshabachim v'omrim Baruch kavod Adonai mimekomo La'el Baruch nimot yitenu l'melech Elkai v'kiyam zimrot Morei refuot norati lo dodom haniflaot hamakadish Or Chadash al Tzion ta'ir v'nizkech kulanu mehira li'oro Baruch Ata Adonai Yotzer HaMe'oro
Amen. Page 111, we prepare for the Shema.
Ava Rabba Ahavtanu Adonai Eloheinu V'ha'erinenu b'toratecha v'dahabek libeinu b'mitzvotecha v'yached levavenu ליאהבה וליראה את שמך, ולא נבוש לעולם ועד, ולא נבוש לעולם ועד, כי בשם קודשך הגדול והנורא בטחנו, נגילה ונשמחה, נגילה ונשמחה בישועתך. והביאנו לשלום מארבע כנפות הארץ, ותוליכנו קוממיות לארצנו, כי אל פועל ישועות אתה, ובנו בחרת מכל עם ולשון, וקרבתנו לשמך הגדול. סלע, סלע באמת להודות לך, ולייחדך באהבה. ברוך אתה אדוני הבוחר בעמו ישראל באהבה. שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו אדוני אחד. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך, ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך, ובלכתך בדרך, ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, והיה.
Adonai Elohechem emet.
ויציב ונכון וקיים וישר ונאמן ואהוב.
Emet.
אלוהי העולם מלכנו צור יעקב מגן ישנו לדור ודור הוא קיים ושמו קיים. וכיסו נכון ומלכותו ואמונתו לעד קיימת. ורב חיים וקיימים נאמנים ונחמדים לעד עולמי עולמים. עליו אתנו פועלנו לברתנו.
לא יעבור אמת שאתה הוא אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו, מלכנו מלך אבותינו, גואלנו גואל אבותינו, יוצרנו צור ישועתנו, הודינו ומצילנו מעולם שמך, אין אלוהים זולתך, עזרת אבותינו אתה הוא מעולם מגן ומשיח.
As we work our way down page 114, we'll be standing for the final three lines and heading directly into our silent Amidah.
תהילות לאלו יונו שירה בשמחה רבה ואמרו כולם מי כמוך באלים אדוני מי נורא תהילות תוסיף אלה שירה חדשה שיבחו גאולים לשמחה שפת הים יחד כולם הודו והמליכו ואמרו Adonai yimloch leolam va'ed Tzur Yisrael Kuma be'ezrat Yisrael Uftechinu mecha Yehuda ve'Yisrael Go aleinu Adonai tzvaot shemo Kedosh Yisrael Baruch Ata Adonai
Those still davening, please continue as the rest of us return to 115B for the repetition.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avoteinu Elohei Avraham Elohei Yitzchak v'Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel v'Elohei Leah Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor v'Hanora El Elyon Gomer Chasadim Tovim v'Konei Hakol v'Zocher Chasdei Avot ומביא גואל לבני בניהם למען שמו באהבה. מלך עוזר פוקד ומושיע ומגן. ברוך אתה אדוני מגן אברהם ופוקד שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני מחיי מתים אתה רב להושיע. משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם מכלכל חיים בחסד מחיי מתים ברחמים רבים. סומך נופלים ורופא חולים ומתיר אסורים ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות ומי דומה לך מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה ונאמן אתה להחיות מתים. ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי המתים. מקדש את שמך בעולם כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום ככתוב על יד נביאך וקרא זה אל זה ויאמר קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות מלוא כל הארץ כבודו. אז בקול רעש גדול אדיר וחזק משמין קול מן השיאים לעומת צרפים לעומתם ברוך יאמרו ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו. ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו. ממקומך מלכנו תופיע ותמלוך עלינו כי מחכים אנחנו לך. מתי תמלוך בציון בקרוב בימינו לעולם ותשכון. תתגדל ותתקדש תוך ירושלים עירך לדור ודור ולנצח ולנצח נצחים. עינינו תראנה מלכותך כדבר כאמור בשירי עוזך על ידי דוד משיח צדקך אלוהי ציון לדור ודור הללויה. לדור ודור נגיד גודלך ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש. בשבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד כי אל מלך גדול וקדוש אתה. ברוך אתה Adonai ha'el hakadosh.
We may be seated. Service continues 117.
Yismach Moshe b'matnat, Yismach Moshe b'matnat, Yismach Moshe b'matnat, b'matnat chelko. Ki even neman, ki even neman, ki even neman karatalo. Ki even neman, ki even neman, ki even neman karatalo. Yismach Moshe b'matnat, Yismach Moshe b'matnat, Yismach Moshe b'matnat, b'matnat chelko. Klil tiferet b'rosha natata be'omda lefanecha ahar sineh ushedu sotabanim harid biyado v'chatuv bahem shemirat Shabbat. Yismach Moshe b'matnat, Yismach Moshe b'matnat, Yismach Moshe b'matnat, b'matnat chelko ki v'chein katuv b'toratecha. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et hashabat la'asot et hashabat l'doratam berit olam beini uvein b'nei Yisrael ot hili olam ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai et hashamayim ve'et haaretz uvayom hashvi shavat vayinafash V'lo netato Adonai Eloheinu l'goyei ha'aratzot V'lo hinchalto malkeinu le'ovdei fasilim V'gam b'menuchato lo yishkenu arelim Ki Yisrael amacha natata b'ava V'zer Yaakov asher ba'am bacharta Am kadeshei shevi kulam yispe'u V'tanegu mituvecha V'hashvi'i rahatzita bo v'kidashto chemdat yamim hoto karata zecher l'maseh v'reshit Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu retzei v'menuchatenu kadshenu b'mitzvotecha v'tein chelkenu b'toratecha Sabenu mitu vecha, v'samchenu b'shuatecha, v'taher libenu le'avdecha v'emet, v'hanchilenu Adonai be'ahava uveratzon Shabbat kodshecha V'anuchu Yisrael Mekadeshei Shemecha Baruch Ata Adonai Mekadesh HaShabbat V'tzei Adonai Eloheinu b'amcha Yisrael Utfilatam V'hashev et avodah lidvir v'techa Utfilatam v'avat kabel b'rotzon Utahil ratzon tamid avodat Yisrael amecha v'techazena einenu b'shuvcha l'tzion barachamim Baruch ata Adonai hamachazir shvinato l'tzion modimanach lulav Shadu Adonai Eloheinu v'le'avotenu v'olam va'etz Hatov kilo kol rachamecha v'amrachem kilo tamu chasadecha me'olam kivinu lach ve'al kulam yitbarach v'yitramam shibcham makinu tamid le'olam va'ed ve'chol ha'chayim yoducha selah ve'alalu et shimcha b'yamet ha'el yeshuatenu ve'ezratenu selah baruch ata Adonai hatov shimecha ulecha noel hodot Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu barchenu babracham sheleshet batorah haktuva ayedei Moshe avdecha hamura mipi Aharon uvanav kohanim am kedoshecha ka'amor yivarecha Adonai v'yishmerecha Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'yichuneka Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom
120.
Sim shalom tova uvracha chen v'chesed v'rachamim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael amecha Barchenu avinu kulanu keyechad v'yor panecha Ki v'yor panecha natata lanu Adonai Eloheinu Torah Chaim v'ahavat chesed v'ahavat chesed u'tzedakah u'veracha v'rachamim v'chaim v'shalom v'rachamim v'chaim v'chaim v'shalom v'tov be'einecha levarech et amcha Yisrael B'chol eit uv'chol shah b'shlomecha Baruch atah Adonai, Hamavorech et Amo Yisrael, Bashalom.
138.
Yitkadav Yitkadash Shemei Rabbah, Yolamat Divrach Chirutei V'yamlich Malchutei, B'chayechon Uv'yamechon Uv'chayei Dechol Beit Yisrael, B'agalah Uv'izman Kariv V'Imaru, Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah Mevorach, V'olam U'liol Me'ol Maya, Yitbarach V'yishtabach V'yitpa'ar V'yitrumam V'yitnaseh, Vitadar, Vitale, Vitalal, Shmei Kudesha Berichu, Ve'ela, Minkol Birchata V'shirata, Tushbechata V'nechamata, Damiron B'yolama V'imeru, Amen. Vitgabel Tzloton Uvoton Decho Yisrael, Kadam, Avuhon Divishmaya V'imeru, Yehei Shlomo Rabba Min Shemaya, V'chayim Aleinu V'yalko Yisrael V'imeru. Oh, say shalom bimromav, huya say shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imeru. Amen.
Turn back to page 72 for the Psalm for the day.
Ayom yom Shabbat kodesh. Mizmor shel yom HaShabbat, tov lo do parnav l'samel kol yom. Yismach tanir b'fal lechem. Tzadikata hamar bifracheret balvano yizke shetulim beveit Adonai atzrot Eloheinu yafriku Odinu Seva Vishenim Verananim Yeyu Ehagi Ki Ashar Adonai Turi Below Avlatavo.
Shakoah. Mourner's Kaddish can be found on page 82 for those who are reciting today. For those reciting, please rise and recite along with me. Yigadal v'yikadash shemei Rabbah, v'yalma divra kirute v'yamlich malchute, v'chayechon uvyomechon uv'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael, ba'agala uv'izman kari v'imru, amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevarach le'olam ulamei al-maya. Yiparach v'yishtabach v'yipa'ar v'yidromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitala v'yitalal shmei d'kudesha richu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran bi'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama Rabbah min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom bimromav. Hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, amen. May their memories continue to bring blessings to this world. Shabbat shalom. Welcome to Refugee Shabbat. We're looking forward to Patty's words in a little bit later in the service, and words from me and others to mark this special occasion and this annual Shabbat and it's our concern for refugees. But at this point, we're about to begin the Torah service and delve into Parashat Vayachel, the continuation of the materials and the assembly instructions for the Mishkan. And one of the things we have in the Parsha is the Keruvim or the cherubim, the protective lion monsters. We also saw protecting the Garden of Eden, and now we'll be protecting the Holy of Holies, but also serve as a conduit, actually, where it's sort of like they're channeling the space where the divine communication takes place to Moses. And if anyone's interested in sort of full Megillah, that I have on Keruvim. It's in a past podcast. So if you go to my podcast site or the Judaism, what is it called again? Judaism for the Thinking Person, on any podcast location, go back to, and if you want to hear more, it's fascinating that we don't know what the Keruvim look like and the different theories throughout Jewish history, and also scholarly speculation about what exactly they look like, whether they were birds, whether they're quasi-humans, what does it mean in Ezekiel's descriptions. It's really good stuff. So that can be found in archived, because for now we're moving forward. I call up Diane Wilson to lead the Torah service. We're on page 139.
Ein kamo hava Elohim Adonai v'ein kamo asacha malchutecha malchut kol olamim umemshaltecha b'chol dor v'dor Adonai melech Adonai malach Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed Adonai oz le'amahu yitein Adonai yivarech et amo v'shalom av harahamim heitiva v'irtzon ha'asher Zion
Page 140.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Shema Yisrael,
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonai, Kadosh Shemo.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol, Shema.
Kadosh, 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 Adonai Eloheinu. That's why I have 2 eyes. And we may be seated. In the Eitz Chaim, we're beginning on page 558. We are in Shemot chapter 36, Exodus 36, beginning with verse 20 for our third part of the Shlish. And that will take us to and I invite you on page 141 of the Siddur to sing the final line with me. V'yazor v'yagim v'yoshel l'chasna bo v'namar amen, godel Eloheinu nu kavod laTorah, bat kohen krava ta'amod, chaya rezo, bat zaman hakohen ve'edo, baruch shenatan Torah Moshe b'kedushato. Ve'atem hadbekim b'Adonai Elohechem chayim kulechem hayom. Baruch Adonai hamorach leolam va'ed.
Adonai hamorach leolam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher b'chayvanu Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Vayat akashim lamishkan atzeshutim omdim 10 amot orach hakeresh ve'ama v'chatzi ama rochav hakeresh ve'achad shtei yadot ve'keresh achad meshulavot echad el echad. כן עשה לחוק קשי המשכן, ויעש את הקשים למשכן, 20 קרשים לפת נגב תימנה, ו40 אדני כסף עשה תחת 20 הקרשים, 2 אדנים תחת הקרש האחד, ושתי ידותיו ושני אדנים תחת הקרש האחד, ושתי ידותיו לצל המשכן, השני לפת צפון עשה 20 קרשים, ו40 אדניהם כסף, 2 אדנים תחת הקרש האחד, ושני אדנים תחת הקרש האחד, ויחטא המשכן ימה עשה שישה קשים ושני קשים עשה למקוצרות המשכן ויחתיים והיו תואמים מלמטה תואמים מלמטה ויחדיו יהיו תמים אל ראשו אל טבעות
הטבעת, אל הטבעת.
אל הטבעת האחת כן עשה לשני המקוצרות והיו 8 קשים ובניהם כסף 16 אדנים 2 אדנים ושני אדנים תחת הקרש האחד הקרש האחד.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet, v'chayei olam natan b'dechenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Shakofech. And our Levi or Bat Levi. Here we go. Ta'amod. Sarah Bat Lev Abraham Habat Levi. We're at verse 31 of chapter 36.
Baruch Adonai habarach.
Baruch Adonai Barach Leolam Vahed.
Baruch Adonai habarach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
אמן. ויעש בחצי שיטים 5 לקשי צלע המשכן האחד ו5 בריחים לקשי צלע המשכן השני ו5 בריחים לקשי המשכן ליחתיים ימה ויעש את הבריח התיכון לברוח בתוך הקרשים מן הקצה אל הקצה ואת הקרשים ציפה זהב ואת טבעותם עשה זהב בתים לבריחים ויצף את הבריחים זהב ויעש את הפרוכת חלד והגמד ותולעת שני ו6 משזר מעשה חושב עשה אותה כרובים ויעש לה 4 עמודי שיטים ויצפם זהב ובהם זהב ויצוק להם 4 אדני כסף ויעש מסך לפתח האוהל תכלת והגמל ותולעת שני ו6 משזר מעשה רוקם ואת עמודיו 5 ובהם וציפה ראשיהם וחשוקיהם זהב ועליהם 5
נחושת.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam natan b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Yishar Kocheh. As Alex takes over duties at the top of the column, we're on our Shlishi. Ya'amod. Abraham ben Chaim v'Bluma. Shlishi. Continue with chapter 37. Baruch Adonai Barach Leolam Vahed.
Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. ויעש בצלאל את הארון עצי שיטים 2.5 אורכו ו1.5 רוחבו ו1.5 קומתו ויצפהו זהב טהור מבית מחוץ ויעש לו זר זהב סביב ויצוק לו 4 טבעות זהב על 4 פעמותיו ושתי טבעות על צלעו האחת ושתי טבעות על צלעו השנית ויעש בדי עצי שיטים, ויצף אותם זהב, ויבא את הבדים בטבעות על צלות הארון, ושאת את הארון, ויעש כפורת זהב טהור, 2.5 אורכה, ו1.5 רוחבה, ויעש 2 כרובים זהב, מקשה עשה אותם, משני קצות הכפורת, כרוב אחד מקצה מזה, וכרוב אחד מקצה מזה, מן הכפורת, עשה את הכרובים משני קצותיו, ויהיו הכרובים פורשי כנפיים למעלה, שוחחים בכנפיהם על הכפורת, ופניהם איש או אחיו, אל הכפורת היו פני הכרובים. ויעש את השולחן עצי שיטים, 200 אורכו ומה רוחבו, ו1.5 קומתו, ויצף אותו זהב טהור, ויעש לו זר זהב סביב, ויעש לו מסגרת טופח סביב, ויעש זר זהב במסגרתו סביב, ויצק לו 4 טבעות זהב, ויתן את הטבעות על 4 הפאות אשר ל4 רגליו, לעומת המסגרת היו הטבעות בתים לבדים לשאת את השולחן, ויעש את הבדים עצי שיטים, ויצף אותם זהב לשאת את השולחן, ויעש את הכלים אשר על השולחן, את קרותיו וכפותיו ואת מנקיותיו, ואת הקצאות אשר יוסח בהן זהב טהור.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר נתן לנו תורה ונס בחיי העולם נטע בתוכנו ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
Amen. Yeshua Koach. As Ben takes over duties from Alex with the scroll, we're at our 4th Aliyah. Ta'amod Yamina Bat Pesha Abraham Harivi'i. And Ben will show you where to touch your Sidor.
Baruch Hu es Adonai Hamborach.
Baruch Adonai Hamborach L'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamborach L'olam Va'ed. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Ha'amim V'natan Lanu Es Torato. Baruch Ata Adonai Nosein HaTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Vayas Hamanara Zahav Tahor Iksha Asad Hamanara Yiricha V'Kana Giviyeha Kapareha Upracheha Mimena Hayu Shesh Kanim Yotzin Mitzidaha Shoshak Neminara Mitzidah Ha'echad Shoshak Neminara Mitzidah Hasheni Shoshak Giviyim Mishugadim B'Kana Ha'echad Kapar Ufera Shoshak Giviyim Mishugadim B'Kana Echad Kapar Ufera Kin Sheshet Hakanim Hayotzim Min HaMenorah V'Menorah Arba'a Giviyim Mishugadim Kapareha Ufracheha B'Chavtor Tachat Shnei Hakanim Mimena B'Chavtor Tachat Shnei Hakanim Mimena B'Chavtor Tachat Shnei Hakanim Mimena B'Sheshet Hakanim Hayotzim Mimena Kaftorehem Ukrotam Mimena Hayu Kula Miksha Achat Zahav Tahor Vayas Neroteha Shiva Mokataha Makataha Zahav Tahor Kikar Zahav Tahor Asa Ta Et Kol Keleha.
Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Asher Natan Lanu Torah Emet B'Chayei Olam Nata B'Tokenu Baruch Ata Adonai Nosein HaTorah.
Amen. Yeshua Koach. And we continue with number Chamishi, number 5. Ya'amod Chaim ben Shlomo HaChamishi. We're continuing with chapter 37, verse 25.
Baruch Adonai Barak.
Baruch Adonai Barak L'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Barak L'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Barak Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Amim V'natan Lanu Et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai Notein HaTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Vayas Mizbach HaKatorah Atzei Shitim Ama Arko V'Amalako Vavu Avabatayim Komato Mimenu Hayu Karnotav
ויצף אותו זהב טהור, וגגו וקריותיו סביב ואת קרנותיו, ויעש לו זר זהב סביב, ושתי טבעות זהב. עשה לו מתחת לזרו, על שתי צלעותיו, על שני צידיו, לבטים ובדים, לשאת אותו בהם. ויעש את הבדים עצי שיטים, ויצף אותם זהב, ויעש את שם המשחה קודש, וכתרת הסמים טהור, מעשה רוקח.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Yeshar koach. As Lonnie gets settled, we call up our 6 aliyah, our shishis. And we are beginning chapter 38. Ya'amod. Avigdor ben Ephraim bechana ha'ashishi. Baruch Adonai borach le'olam va'ed.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher b'char banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Vayas et mizbach ola atzei shitim, 5 amot orko, ו5 amot rachbo rabua, ו3 amot komato. Vayas karnotav, al 4 pinotav, mimenu hayu karnotav, ויצף אותו נחושת. ויעש את כל כלי המזבח, את הסירות ואת היעים ואת המזרקות, את המזלגות ואת המחטות, כל כליו עשה נחושת. ויעש למזבח מחבר מעשה רשת נחושת, תחת קרקובו מלמטה עד חציו. ויצוק 4 טבעות ו4 צוות במחבר הנחושת, בתים לבדים. ויעש את הבדים עצי שיטים, ויצף אותם נחושת. ויהווה את הבדים בטבעות על צלות המזבח, ושאת אותו להם, נבוב לוחות עשה אותו. ויעש את הכיור נחושת, ואת קנו נחושת, ומראות הצובעות אשר צלו פתח המועד.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet, v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Yeshar koach. And our shvi'i, our 7th aliyah. Ta'amod. So mata. Bat Yosef v'bracha ha'ashvi'i. We're continuing with chapter 38, verse 9.
Baruch Adonai Hamborach.
Baruch Adonai Hamborach le'olam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamborach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
ויעש את החצר לפת נגב תימנה, כלי החצר 6 מצר, 100 באמה, עמודיהם 20, ואדניהם 20 נחושת, ועבי העמודים וחשוקיהם כסף. ולפת צפון 100 באמה, עמודיהם 20, ואדניהם 20 נחושת, ועבי העמודים וחשוקיהם כסף. ולפת ים קלעים 50 באמה, עמודיהם 10 ואדניהם 10, ועבי העמודים וחשוקיהם כסף. ולפת קדמה מזרחה 50 אמה, קלעים 15 אמה, אל הכתף עמודיהם 3 ואדניהם 3, ולכתף השנית מזה ומזה לשער החצר, קלעים 15 אמה, עמודיהם 3 ואדניהם 3, כל קלעי החצר סביב 6 משזר, ואדניהם לעמודים נחושת, ועבי העמודים וחשוקיהם כסף, וציפוי ראשיהם כסף, והם מחושקים כסף כל עמודי החצר, ומסך שער החצר מעשה רקם. תכלת וארגמן ותולת שני ו6 משזר, ו20 אמה אורך וקומה ורוחב 5 אמות לעומת קלי החצר, ועמודיהם 4 ואדניהם 4 נחושת, ועביהם כסף וציפוי ראשיהם וחשוקיהם כסף, וכל היתדות למשכן ולחצר סביב נחושת.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת, שחיי עולם נתן בתוכנו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
Amen. We're going to have our, as the scroll is placed down here, we're going to have our blessing for those in need of healing and for those who could use some healing. So I ask for names at the appropriate time. Misha Perach Avoten Abraham Yitzchak Yaakov Sarah Rivka Rachel Leah Yivarech Virapeh Tocholim Michatin Alea Bat Elamira Maim Sheva Elisheva Firagudas Dan Yitzchak Ben Ruven Abraham Valeah Yisrael Hirsch Ben Abraham Halevi V'Shengel Sprinza David Ben Abba Baruch Bavloria David Amanoff Yonah Moshe Ben Shoshana Valib Yonatan Ben Raphael Valayla Helen Amanoff, Stacy Simpson Tuhu, Hannah Hindaba Moshe Vabrena, Shlomo Yonah Bat Avraham, Masha Brucha, Sam Silver, Dvorah Yehudi, Gidol Henya, Bat Shendel Sprinza, Shoshana Batova, Shlomo Hil Ben Herschel Vishendela, Miriam Ruth Bat Avram V'Saraha, Alana Schatz, Rivka Leah Bat Avram Meir, Miriam Bat Ben Zion V'Esther, Aaron Ben Elisha Mikael, Yehuda Aaron Ben Elizabeth Tzipora, Harav Shago Yosef Ben Rezel, Dvorah Viva Bat Yitzchak Esther, Avram Ben Dovid, Hashem Montgomery, Avraham Ben Sher, Judith Elkin, Cornelius Barber, Benjamin Yisrael Ben Chanita, Dave Dubinsky, Tzvi Yisar Baton Ben Nechama, Eliezer Ben Moshe Ben Mira, Sam Warner, Atticus Schoonover, Natalie Bat Moshe Veleha, Jen Cox, Rivka Bakuna, Shmuel Ben Yoel, Paul Kiddis, Max Aaron, Azriel Shashlomi, Shalom Zev Ben Moshe, Kelly Popik, Yosef Ben Avram Vasara, Abraham Mikael Ben Chayalev, Yitzchak Tzvi, Florence Eisner Model, Shlomi Bat Shara, Nomi Kaya Bat Shlomit, Sharon Bat Leah, Remy Hitchcock, Shoshana Bat Sarah, Yitzchak Ben Yosef Paso, Esther Malka Bat Miriam, Avner Ben Yaakov Leha, Rachel Bat Abraham Leah, David Ben Avraham, Kimberly Fuller, Esther Gittel Bat Chaya Rivka, Tito Flores, Karen Tolson, Sarah Esther Bat Moshe Avram Shoshana Rud, Faival Yankov Ben Harry, Viv Bessie, Moshe Ben Chaya Leah, Elisheva Bat Sadie Vishmua, Edward James Mills, Barbara Levin Bergman, Marla Biederman, Yefifia Bat Yosef Yehudi, Mayor Ben Hillel V'Blum Abbas, Michael Cohen, Ve'et.
Hip war.
Those suffering terror and distress in the Ukraine. Ved kol hacholim b'kila kedosha hakadosh baruch hu yimalei rachamim aleihem lehachzikam rapotam v'yishlach lahem mehera refuah shema min hashamayim refuat hanefesh urefuat haguf b'tok shachalei Yisrael shabati milizok efrak rava lavo hashta ve'agalav isman kariv v'nomar amen. Yikada v'yikada shemei Rabbi Bi'alma divra kirtei v'yamlich malchutei v'chayechon uvyomechon uv'chayetecho beit Yisrael v'gala b'zman kariv ve'imeru Yehi shmei Rabbi mevarach li'alam u'lam me'almaya Yiparach v'yishtabach v'yipar v'dramam v'naseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei d'kudesha le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiram v'yama v'imeru. Call up our dresser and lifter for the first scroll. Namdu le'agaha v'liglila. V'zot haTorah asher sam Moshe lifnei bnei Yisrael al pi Adonai biyad Moshe Eitz chaim hi lamachazikim ba v'tom ha'merusha Eitz chaim hi lamachazikim ba v'tom ha'merusha וכל נתיבותיך שלום דרכינו עם וכל נתיבותיך שלום We may be seated for the Maftir reading. We're turning back a little bit in Exodus. We're going back to chapter 30, verse 11. It can be found on page 523 of the Eitz Chaim. And so we are at, or in, again, chapter 30, verse 11. I just want to get my spot. Thanks. There we go. Which will start with the very, very, very rare introduction of Vayidaber Adonai al Moshe Lemor. The word kitisa. Yeah, Ta'amod, Mira Shlomi, Bat Ruven Meir, Ilana Yehudi, Hamaftira.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach Leolam Vaed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach Leolam Vaed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amin v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Vayidaber Adonai el Moshe Lemor ki tisa el rosh bnei Yisrael kudehem benanu ishkol fer nafsho l'Adonai bifkodotam v'lo yebahem negef bifkod otam zayitnu kol ha'avera pikudim machatzita shekel b'shekel hakodesh 20 gerah shekel machatzita shekel turumat l'Adonai kol העובר לפיקודים מבין 20 שנה ומעלה ייתן תרומת אדוני אשר לא ירבה והדל לא ימית ממחצית השקל לתת את תרומת אדוני לכפר על נפשותיכם ולקחת את כסף הכיפורים מאת בני ישראל ונתת אותו על עבודת אוהל מועד היה לבני ישראל לזיכרון לפני אדוני לכפר על נפשותיכם
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torat emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch Atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. We rise once again as we call up our second lifter and second dresser. וזאת התורה אשר שם משה לפני בני ישראל על פי אדוני ביד משה Ashlosha devarim, ashlosha devarim, ashlosha devarim, ha'olam omed. As we're addressing the second scroll, let's keep in mind that we're reading the second scroll for Shabbat Shekalim, which is a reminder that we here now begin the countdown to Pesach. So maybe you can keep in your mind what that means, maybe in terms of what you buy, what you give away, what you eat from your pantry, and also the preparations and the lead up. We begin to count down at this time. And we may be seated. The squirrels are jumping forward, asking if that's kosher for Pesach. And I believe that Ron will check later if the bird feed has a hechsher. The Haftarah can be found, Haftarah from Kings, 2 Kings, can be found on 1277. It's at the back of Eitz Chaim, the special Haftarah for today, Shabbat Shekalim. And if you are in Sefaria or another Tanakh, we are in 2 Kings, chapter 12. Mir Sussman is our Maftira. And we'll introduce her remarks today.
So I'm not taking up too much time, but I asked Rav Nadav if it was okay if I said something in honor of Refugee Shabbat. I am back at working at Jewish Family Services, which is still the only refugee resettlement agency in Washtenaw County. And there were two things that happened yesterday that weighed really heavily on my heart, and I wanted to share them with you. The first was one of my colleagues is Ukrainian and sent out an email to the staff saying, essentially freaking out and just asking for support, and is incredibly worried about friends and family back in Ukraine. The nature of JFS and the staff and the work that we do, we're a very international staff. And we have people with origins and families in India, Lebanon, Iraq, I believe Syria, Ethiopia, Afghanistan, Israel, and I can't remember how many other countries, and all over the former Soviet Union. And my colleague essentially received a barrage of emails back saying, I know exactly how you feel. I have felt this before. I'm feeling it right now. To use an overused but accurate term, they're all feeling very triggered and maybe a little PTSD'd. So that was the first thing that happened yesterday. The second thing that happened yesterday was one of the things that I'm doing at JFS is I'm registering a bunch of children, Afghan children, for school. And part of the registration, they don't have birth certificates. So part of what I do is I have to attach whatever ID they have. And the identification that they have is a photo ID from the US government that was taken, I'm guessing, in a military base overseas, maybe Qatar or Germany. I don't actually know where the pictures were taken. But the thing that really struck me about these photos, these kids are so young. They have the smallest little faces. And they're just, preschoolers, first grade, second grade, these are little kids. And they all had this look on their eyes of looking at this camera going, I have no idea what's going on. And the families that were resettling from Afghanistan, we have something, I actually have lost count of how many children under the age of 1 we have. At one point last month, I think we had between 15 and 20 pregnant women, which meant that they left Afghanistan in their first trimester. Having been pregnant in my first trimester, I know how difficult that must have been. And one of the families that I saw yesterday had a 3-month-old. They left with a 3-month-old, in addition to all the other children that they had. So those were two things that they're not my stories. They're not my personal experience, but I wanted to share them with you. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'nviim tovim v'ratza v'divreihem hane'emarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai habocher b'Torah uv'Moshe avdo uv'Yisrael amo Uvinviei haemet v'tzedek. Ben sheva shanim Yehoash b'malcho bishnat sheva leYehu melech Yehoash v'arba'im shana malach b'Yerushalayim v'shem imo tzivya miBe'ersheva. Vayas Yehoash hayashar b'nei Adonai kol yamav asher hora'u Yehoyada hakohen rak habamot lo saru od ha'am mezabchim umekatrim babamot. Vayomer Yehoash el hakohanim kol kesef hakadashim asher yuvav et Adonai kesef over ish kesef nafshot erko kol kesef asher yale alev ish lehavi beit Adonai yikchu lahem hakohanim ish met makaro vehem yechazko et bedek habayit lechol asher yimatzeh sham badek. Vayehi bishnat 23 l'shana lamelech Yehoash lo chizku hakohanim et bedek habayit. Vayikra hamelech Yoash leYehoda hakohen v'lakohanim vayomer aleihem madua Einchem mechazkim et bedek habayit ve'ata al tikchu chesef me'et makarechem ki bedek habayit titnuhu vayeotu hakohanim livilti kechat kesef me'et ha'am ulivilti chazek et bedek habayit. Vayikach Yehoyada hakohen aron echad vayikov chor bedalto vayiten oto etzel hamizbeach miyamin bevo ish beit Adonai v'natnu shama hakohanim shomrei hasaf et kol hakesef hamuvav et Adonai vayehi kirotaham kirav hakesef baron vayal sofer hamelech v'hakohen hagadol vayatsuru v'yimnuhu et hakesef hanimtza bebeit Adonai v'natnu et hakesef hamitukahan al yedei osei hamlacha המופקדים בית אדוני, ויוציאוהו לחרשי העץ ולבונים העושים בית אדוני, ולגודרים ולחוצבי האבן, ולקנות עצים ואבני מחצב, לחזק את בדק בית אדוני, ולכל אשר יצא על הבית לחזקה. אך לא יעשה בית אדוני סיפות כסף, מזמרות, מזרקות, חצוצרות, כל כלי זהב וכלי כסף, מן הכסף המובא בית אדוני, כי לעושי המלאכה ייתנו וחיזקו בו את בית אדוני, ולא יחשבו את האנשים אשר ייתנו את הכסף על ידם לתת לעושי המלאכה, כי באמונה הם עושים. כסף אשם וכסף חטאות לא יובא בית אדוני, לכהנים יהיו. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, צור כל העולמים, צדיק בכל הדורות, היה לנאמן האומר ועושה, המדבר ומקיים, שכל דבריו אמת וצדק. נאמן אתה הוא אדוני אלוהינו, ונאמנים דבריך, ודבר אחד מדבריך, אחור לא ישוב ריקם, כי אל מלך נאמן ורחמן אתה. ברוך אתה אדוני, היה לנאמן בכל דבריו. רחם על ציון כי היא בית חיינו, ולעלובת נפש תושיע במהרה בימינו. ברוך אתה אדוני, משמח ציון בבניה. שמחנו אדוני אלוהינו, באליהו הנביא עבדך, ובמלכות בית דוד משיחך. במהרה יבוא ויגל ליבנו, על כיסו לא ישב זר, ולא ינחלו עוד אחרים את כבודו. כי בשם קודשך נשבעת לו, שלא יכבה נרו לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן דוד. על התורה ועל העבודה ועל הנביאים ועל יום השבת הזה שנתת לנו אדוני אלוהינו, לקדושה ולמנוחה, לכבוד ולתפארת. על הכל אדוני אלוהינו אנחנו מודים לך ומברכים אותך, יתברך שמך בפי כל חי, תמיד לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני, מקדש השבת.
We continue with Yukum Porkan and Torah service, page 148.
Yikum Porkan min Shemaya.
Yukum Porkan in Shemaya.
V'yishla b'racha, v'chatzlacha, v'chol maseh yedehem, im kol Yisrael amen, v'nomar amen.
I'm going to ask one Diane to head off, one Diane to be on deck. The announcing of the new month is on page 150, Mivarachim HaKodesh. And I'd like us to be praying when we're thinking of the words, not only for us in Second Adar, but particularly for the people of Ukraine. And also, I include Russian soldiers who are doing this against their will, from what I'm reading as well, and the frustration they're in. We live in a time, we all know it, where by doing the work of tshuva as a nation in America, understanding where we need to turn, where we need to make reparations, where we need to heal and be better, which is the beautiful fundamental heart of democracy, that we sometimes fail to realize just how tremendously fortunate we are to live in a self-correcting mechanism, beautifully founded on principles that come from Torah, specifically that come out of challenging the role, challenging any kind of legitimacy of tyranny, of Pharaoh, of those who rise to power based on hatred and the authority of themselves rather than of the moral law. And we live in a time where that is becoming increasingly praised, whereas people express critique and frustration with democracy, some of it quite valid in the way our system has evolved, the games get played, that people turn to authoritarian regimes and praise North Korea, and praise Vladimir Putin, and praise China, and with the ways they can get things done. I see it all over the media, and this is a stark reminder that we need to deeply oppose it. Torah stands absolutely against tyranny, authoritarianism, because it leads to this kind of hubris, violence, and the suffering of children and of innocence. I'm going to share a poem. There's only so much we can do. We can pray, right? And we can talk, and we can send out those prayers. So last night, it seems like a small thing, but I spent an hour or so reading Ukrainian poetry, modern and contemporary Ukrainian poetry. So I wanted to hear, because I haven't been hearing the voices that speak through those words, and I wanted to hear those voices. I read some last night at services. I'm going to share a very short poem of an extraordinary poet. His name is Seri Zadan, and he's gotten a lot of acclaim in Europe and in America as well. And so this is a translation of a short piece from his series called Stones. In his poetry, he talks a lot about the cities of Eastern Ukraine, the cities that have structures built under Soviet occupation, and then the kind of dystopian landscapes produced by the corruption of the immediately past Ukrainian regime, also under the Russian authoritarian thumb and promotion, and how it's hollowed out the very landscapes that he and his friends and family live in. So he has a series called Stones, and this is a tiny little piece from that series. Seri Zadan. We speak of the cities we lived in that went into night like ships into the winter sea. We speak of the cities that suddenly lost their ability to resist in front of our eyes, like a circus show where every acrobat dies, and so does each laughing clown. Enchanted, you watch, never turning away, and suddenly on this circus set, you grow up. I'm going to ask Meg Bernstein, our engagement director and ritual assistant, to read a Hashkivenu-based poem that she read last night. And then we will do the blessing for the new month, wishing these blessings not only for us, but for the people of Ukraine.
May it be your will, ever-living sovereign and creator, that all who fear for their lives and their country find a moment of rest and stillness tonight. Spread your sukkah of shalom over Ukraine and Russia tonight. Let each who fights and yearns for freedom find courage in her heart. Let the one who follows blindly a cruel and corrupt leader find his eyes unclouded. Let them both lay down their weapons. Fill them with your truth, bind their wounds with your healing light. May their souls be lifted up by the strength of our prayers. May they live to see another beautiful day in the land that they love. and may a great peace fill that land as the waters fill the sea. V'yimru, amen.
Amen. Please rise, we're on page 150.
Yehi ratzon milifanecha, Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei Avotenu, shetichadesh aleinu et hachodesh hazeh l'tova u'livracha, ve'titen lanu chaim arukim, chaim shel shalom, chaim shel tova, chaim shel bracha, Chaim shel parnasa, Chaim shel chilutz atzamot, Chaim sheyesh behem yirat shamayim v'yirat chet, Chaim she'en behem busha uchlima, Chaim shel osher v'chavod, Chaim shetiyeh banu avat Torah v'yirat shamayim, Chaim sheyimelu mishalot lebeinu l'tova, Amen. Selah. Misha Hasanisim Lavotenu. Begalotam, me'avdut lehevut. Huigalotanu bakarov. Vayikabetz nitchenu. Me'abakan vot haaretz. Chaverim, kol Yisrael, v'nomar Amen. Rosh Chodesh Adar Bet, yeh b'yom Chamishi, b'yom Shishi, haba aleinu, v'al kol Yisrael, Letova.
New month of second Adar will begin on Wednesday night, Thursday, and Friday. May it hold blessing for us, for all the people of Israel.
Yechad Sheu HaKadosh Baruch Hu Aleinu v'al kol amo beit Yisrael l'chaim u'l'shalom l'sason u'l'simcha l'shua u'l'nechama b'nomar Amen.
May the Holy One bless this new month for us, for all God's people, the house of Israel, all of those who are being terrorized at this time. May Adonai bring life and peace, joy and gladness, deliverance, consolation. Let us say,
Amen.
Amen.
You may be seated. We continue with Ashrei, page 151.
Ashrei Yoshvei Beitecha Od Yehodu Hasala.
Ashrei Am Shekapala, Ashrei Am
Tehila LeDavid Aromincha Elachachai Melech Davarcha Shimcha Leolam Va'ed. Gadol Adonai U'Hulam Me'od V'li Gdulato En Heker.
Dor Shabbat Ma'asecha, U'Boratecha Yayidu.
Hadar Kavod Hodaha V'divrei Niflotecha Asicha.
Bezruz Noratecha Yomim, U'Boratecha Safranel.
Zeher Rav Tuvcha Yabiu V'Tzidkatecha Yiranenu.
Chanu Barachum Adonai, Erech Apam Midal Chesed.
Tov Adonai lakol v'rahamav al kol ma'asav.
יודוך אדוני כל מעשיך, וחסידיך יברכוך.
Kavod malhutecha yomeru, ugratecha yagaberu.
והודיע לבני אדם גבורותיו, וכבוד האדם מלכותו.
Malhutecha malhut kol olamim, umemshaltecha b'chol dor vador.
סומך אדוני לכל הנוכלים, צוחק לכל הכפופים.
Ene kol elacha yisaberu, v'ata noten lachem et achlam b'ito.
פותח את ידיך, ומשביע לכך רצון.
Tzadik Adonai b'chol derachav. V'chasid b'chol ma'asav.
קרוב אדוני לכל קוראיו, וכל אשר יראו עליהם.
Ritzon yireyav ya'asa. Yet shavatam yishma v'yoshiem.
שומר אדוני כל העם, את רשעים להשמיד.
Tfilat Adonai yidaber pi, v'yivarech kol basar shem kodsho le'olam va'ed.
We invite up our ark opener and our Torah carriers. We rise on 153. And Kadesh, Kadesh Yameinu, Kadesh Yameinu, We remain standing for the prayer for our country on page 148.
Our God and God of our ancestors, we ask your blessings for our country, for its government, for its leaders and advisors, and for all who exercise just and rightful authority. Teach them insights from your Torah, that they may administer all affairs of state fairly, that peace and security, happiness and prosperity, justice and freedom may forever abide in our midst.
Creator of all flesh, bless all the inhabitants of our country with your spirit. Forge a common bond in true harmony, to banish hatred and bigotry, to safeguard the ideals and free institutions of the pride and glory of our country.
May this land under your providence be an influence for good throughout the world, uniting all people in peace and freedom, helping them to fulfill the vision of your prophet. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they experience war anymore. And let us say, Amen.
Amen.
Avinu Shebashamayim, Tzur Yisrael v'Goalo, Barich et Medinat Yisrael, Reshit Tzmichat Gulatenu. Hagen Aleha ve'evrat Chazdecha, Ufros Aleha Sukat Shlomecha, Ushlach Orcha v'Amitcha l'Rasheha, Sarea v'Yatzeha. V'taknem be'etza tova milfanecha, Chazek et Yedei Megine Eretz Kadshenu. V'hanchilem Eloheinu Yeshua, v'ateret netzachon ta'atrem, v'natata shalom ba'aretz, v'simchat olam b'yoshveha, v'nomar Amen.
Amen.
Avinu Shebashamayim, Rock and Redeemer of the people Israel, bless the state of Israel with its promise of redemption. Shield it with your love. Spread over it the shelter of your peace. Guide its leaders and advisors with your light and your truth. Help them with your good counsel. Strengthen the hands of those who defend our holy land. Deliver them. Crown their efforts with triumph. Bless the land with peace and its inhabitants with lasting joy. And let us say, Amen.
Amen. Prayer for Peace, Psalm 149. As the reader comes forward, I'd like to tell you that the Prayer for Peace was written in the early 1800s. It was written by Rabbi Nathan Sternhartz. He was the successor to Rabbi Nachman in Breslov, but he was not from Breslov. He went there to become the successor or to study with Rabbi Nachman. He was known as Natan of Nemirov because he was originally from the Ukraine.
May we see the day when war and bloodshed cease, when a great peace will embrace the whole world.
Nation will not threaten nation. Mankind will not again know war.
For all who live on earth shall realize we have not come into being to hate or to destroy. We have come into being to praise, to labor, and to love.
Compassionate God, bless the leaders of all nations with the power of compassion.
Fulfill the promise conveyed in Scripture. I will bring peace to the land, and you shall lie down, and no one shall terrify you.
I will rid the land of vicious beasts, and it shall not be ravaged by war.
Let love and justice flow like a mighty stream. Let peace fill the earth as the waters fill the sea. And let us say,
Amen. I'd like to ask you to continue standing for one more prayer that I'm going to read. This is a prayer for democracy everywhere, written by Rabbi David Seidenberg. May you tear out tyranny and despotism, ruin those who cheat and deceive, and break those who oppress the vulnerable. Make the reign of the arrogant disappear from all lands. May those who attack democracies everywhere stumble and fail, and may their plans be as naught. Destroy them, humble them, bring on their downfall soon in our days. May you give to all people strength and will to pursue righteousness and uproot violence, and to seek peace as a united force. May healing, good life, and peace flourish throughout the world. And may God protect Volodymyr Zelensky and let his country triumph over this invasion. We may be seated. Amen. I would love to be able to say that this is a difficult segue to discussing Ukraine and discussing refugees, but unfortunately, it's one of the many ways that refugees come into our midst, although too few. Before I call up Patty to share a personal experience, I'd like, on behalf of Hayas, on behalf of Trua and Refugee Shabbat across the country at this time of year, to share some of the information that gives us context. There are now estimated to be more than 84 million people who have been forcibly displaced due to persecution and violence. About 26.5 million of these people are refugees. Most of the remainder are internally displaced within the borders of their own country. 85% of refugees are being hosted in developing countries. This is largely due to geography. These countries are closest to the conflict zones people are fleeing. But often when at least I watch the news, I get the feeling that refugees are coming directly to developed countries. It minimizes the importance of developing countries themselves shouldering the vast majority of the burden to help refugees and to give them sanctuary and support. Turkey is the country that now hosts the most refugees, approximately 3.7 million. 68% of the world's refugees come from just 5 countries: Syria, Venezuela, Afghanistan, South Sudan, and Myanmar. Refugee advocates often refer to 3 durable solutions for refugees. They include local integration for refugees who can safely rebuild their lives in the country to which in 2020, to the country in which they originally fled. In 2020, and this is the last full year that we have concrete data, only 34,400 refugees were resettled globally, although there are tens of millions of refugees worldwide, and that's just 1/3 of the number resettled in 2019 in this country. So in America, of those millions and millions, just over 34,000 refugees were resettled. It's just 1/3 of the number resettled in 2019, when there were over nearly 108,000 settled in the US. The US used to lead the world in terms of resettlement. However, because the US has decreased the number of refugees it resettles by more than 80%, this has changed. And it's contributed to the really low numbers of refugees that are now settled in the United States. And as Mira has shared with me personally, one of the things that's meant is that refugee resettlement agencies, and those who do that work, have been laid off. Their departments have been closed, that expertise lost. Support for those who do the work has been eliminated. And now the burden falls on the few that are left, the attempt to rehire, to retrain, and to rebuild. Just contrast this for a moment with the fact that the US previously had been resettling refugees for decades. In the aftermath of World War II, for example, and the first refugee legislation enacted by Congress in this country, over 650,000 Europeans were resettled in America, 650,000. And now we're down to numbers in the thousands, the very low 10,000s, very low. To give an example, even in 2016, where numbers were already going down, very low. In Michigan, 4,200 refugees were settled in Michigan. And in 2020, 493. 4,258, and then 4 years later, 493. I don't need to tell you that Leviticus, which we are soon to enter and calls us to be a holy people, demands that the stranger who resides with you shall be to you as one of your citizens, in chapter 19, verse 34, that you are to love them as yourself, for we were strangers in the land of Israel, and so says God. And as the Talmud points out, the Torah calls our attention to the fact that 36, although some say 46 places, mention the command to welcome the stranger and to love them and to care for them and to support them. Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs, Alav HaShalom, wrote in Faith in the Future the following: the Hebrew Bible contains the great command, you shall love your neighbor as yourself, in Leviticus 19. And this has often been taken as the basis of biblical morality, but it is not. It is only a part of it. Because the Jewish sages noted that on only one occasion does the Hebrew Bible command us to love our neighbor, but in 37 places, some say 46, it commands us to love the stranger. Our neighbor is one we love because they are like ourselves. The stranger is one we are taught to love, precisely because perhaps initially, maybe, they do not seem to be, perhaps, like ourselves. We all know, I'll close with this, that Maimonides' highest level of tzedakah, of course, is not anonymous giving. That's the second level of tzedakah. The highest level of tzedakah is to give a gift, I'm quoting from the Mishnah Torah, a gift, a loan, or form with this person a partnership, or find work and a job for them until they are strong enough so that they do not need to ask others for their livelihood and sustenance. Patty, I invite you up to share your experience working with refugees in Arizona.
Good morning, everyone. Is the sound okay? I've not been known to be quiet or graceful. It's okay, just stay here a minute. How's this? Okay, let's try this again. We okay? All right. I'm here today to talk about my experiences with people who were evacuated from Afghanistan, timely because we're reading from the book of Exodus. This is another Exodus story, one of 1,000 accounts of migration repeated throughout human history. Migration happens when people are either displaced within their country or they have to leave their country because of political upheaval, war, discrimination, climate, environmental crises. This Exodus story began at the end of August when the Taliban took over Kabul and Afghanistan came under the complete control of the Taliban. In the chaos that followed, the United States began to evacuate people who had worked for the United States government or who had been associated in some way with the United States because their lives were in danger. Evacuees first landed at US military bases in Sicily, Qatar, and Germany, where they were given medical treatment, vaccinations, and temporary relief before they were flown to military bases throughout the United States. My month was spent at Holloman Air Force Base in Alamogordo, New Mexico, and I'll talk to you about that this morning. In our Torah portion, God gives instructions to build the Mishkan, the tent of meeting, and its assembly, its furnishings, its planks, its posts, its bars, its sockets, all of which the Israelites did with eagerness. And in the middle of a desert in New Mexico, another sacred space was built, an entire village eagerly constructed by the Air Force out of heartfelt obligation for the Afghan people who were soon to arrive there. In a matter of weeks, a village was built, a village accommodating 5,000 people, plus staff of all sorts to support their stay. It was a refuge for the first time in years, and for some, the first time in their lives, where there were no threats, no killings, no bombs. In this village, children ran around with abandon, women walked freely with each other, people prayed openly 5 times a day. The attention to detail and the sensitivity by the builders of this village was striking. It was amazing. Each guest received a prayer rug. Men and women had their separate social tents. People were respected throughout every living moment of the day. The village itself was a logistical wonder. The whole village was built out of tents. Tents housed dormitories, dining halls, classrooms, recreational spaces, a mosque, and offices. Soccer fields and basketball courts were scattered throughout the village. Hundreds of porta potties, generators, water tanks, and water heaters encircled the perimeter. Even a bus route was established. There was a village mayor, representative councils, advocates, and interpreters. Tents were filled with representatives from the Department of State, the International Rescue Committee, the International Office of Migration. There were classroom teachers, medical personnel, and a legal team of which I was a part. The legal team started out as one person for those 5,000 people and eventually included 5 of us. We assisted in applications for chief of mission or COM approval, the first step in their legal process. Each person upon entry into the United States was given parole status. It is a temporary safety measure until more permanent status will be given. After a person receives COM approval, we then assemble documents for special immigrant status or SIVs. Their special immigrant status claim was that they worked for the United States or were associated with the United States, which is a special category. Most of the people I spoke with were in special forces. They fought in conjunction with the United States military against the Taliban. Their applications required what is known as a threat letter, statements that established that they were harmed or would be harmed should they return to Afghanistan. Time and again, over and over, every time I heard the same account when I had to ask them, what do you think would happen if you returned? They will kill me if I return, was the response every time. Before these people left Afghanistan, people received warning letters from the Taliban. They slipped them under the door or they thrust the letter upon a relative or friend, threatening harm or death if they did not stop working in conjunction with the United States. Family members were stopped at gunpoint and giving warning messages to relate to their relatives. Homes were searched, ransacked, pilfered, set on fire. Younger brothers were killed as warnings to stop colluding with the enemy. Sisters were raped as revenge for conspiring with the United States. Passports were seized to prevent escape. No longer was this information gleaned from the media. These were personal stories told by stunned men sitting in front of me, stories told by women weeping for their sons and husbands, stories told through photos that they brought on their phones. The reality is horrifying and deeply personal. The effects of their ongoing trauma will haunt them for a very long time, and their care is now part of our responsibility to them. At the village, people also now had the freedom to relax and have fun. We were the go-to tent, I will admit that, where men taught us the Afghan national dance, where we all chatted over cups of ever-present tea, and where we were challenged to games of cricket. One woman-only workshop on asylum, which was informational and somewhat serious, was transformed into a dance party, rivaled only by my family during dining room discos. We were trusted, a sacred trust given by people whose faith had been violated for years. One of the most emotional times at the village was departure, when people left for the communities in which they were to settle. Following the official check-ins and check-outs, the send-off was ceremonial, a triumph of sorts, for people were moving ahead in their journey. It was also when any remnants of professionalism gave way to waves of emotion pouring out. We all wept with joy for the new prospects and with sadness for close friends leaving. We also knew that the continuation of their journey would be a very hard road. Most of the arriving Afghans do not speak English, nor do they have education or skills that easily transfer here. They are haunted by fears for their family members left behind, their wives, their children, their parents, their siblings, who are at the mercy of the Taliban. Those who have been left behind in Afghanistan continue to be threatened, harmed, and are in hiding in order to escape persecution. The winter is harsh now in Afghanistan. People are freezing and starving. There is no government, there is no order, there's only brutality. My journey pales in comparison to that of the people from Afghanistan, and it would have been a journey of conceit had I not allowed myself to be vulnerable to what I was immersed in. The effects on me are deep and lasting. My understanding and knowledge of political and social issues has deepened. I've learned more about Islam and its followers and Afghan culture, which I hope have enabled me to become more culturally sensitive. My spiritual self, my soul is affected more than I can ever describe, and probably more than I realize. My trip ended and the work continues at all levels. Soon after I arrived home, I learned about several hundred people from Afghanistan and Dearborn who are languishing in a hotel, some of whom I knew through the village. Resettlement agency caseworkers, overloaded, not assertive. Hotel staff insensitive to their culture, and they are becoming despondent. Maya Angelou has written that the ache for home lives in all of us. In our Ann Arbor community, there's several hundred Afghans aching. They not only need groceries or rides to appointments, they ache for friendships. They ache for human connection, to make a cup of tea for a guest and to show their gratitude. They ache for their children, and they need your children to play with theirs. These connections are what make resettlement a benefit to everyone in a community. The Torah instructs us 36 times, or perhaps 46, to care for the stranger. If we truly walk with Torah, this is where it can be manifested, for we are always given the opportunity to create sacred spaces of our own. The human connections of my trip will forever be in my heart, and most of all, the people of Afghanistan will stay with me. A humbling reminder that we're really all the same. Our needs and desires are the same. That human connection is sometimes the best and perhaps the only comfort. We read about Exodus in the Torah, and we know how that story ends. All of us now have the opportunity to shape the direction of this particular Exodus by truly making this a promised land. Shabbat Shalom.
Let's take that Torah into our prayers of Musa, which begins on page 155. Please rise.
Yikadash me Rabbi, Yamati Frakirute, Yamlith Malchute, Bechayechon, Yomechon, L'chayet Kol Beit Yisrael, Hagala, Isman Karib, V'yemaru, Amen. Yehesh me Rabba Mevora, Le'olam olam le'almaya, Yitbarak, Yitbarak, V'yishtabak, V'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnasei, V'yitadar v'yitalet, ויתעלה שמי דקודשה לאלה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה ושפחתה ונחמתה גם ירם בעלמה ויאמרו אמן. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Elohei Avotenu Elohei Abraham Elohei Yitzchak Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel Elohei Leah Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor V'Hanora El Elyon Homel Chasadim Tovim V'Konei Hakol V'Zocher Chasdei Avot U'Mevi Goel Livnei V'Nechem למען שמו באהבה, מלך עוזר פוקד ומושיע ומגן. ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ופוקד שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי מתים אתה רב להושיע. משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם, מקלקל חיים בחסד. מחיי מתים ברחמים רבים, צמח נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות ומדומה לך, מלך ממיט ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה לחיות מתים. ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי המתים. נעריצך ונעתישך כסוד ציון שרפי קודש, המקדישים שמך בקודש. ככתוב על יד נביאך וכרז זה ויאמר קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות מלוא כל הארץ כבודו. כבודו מלא עולם, אשר טוב שואלים זה על זה, היי מקום כבודו, לעומתם ברוך יאמרו, ברוך אדוני. עמים כמוהו יפן ברחמים, לכונם המייחדים שמו, ערב ובוקר בכל יום תמיד, פעמיים באהבה שמו אומרים. ישראל אדוני אלוהינו הוא אלוהינו הוא אבינו הוא מלכנו הוא מושיענו והוא ישמיענו ברחמן שני שני לעיני כל חי להיות לכם אלוהים אני אדוני אלוהיכם ובדברי קדשך כתוב לאמור אדוני אלוהיכם אלוהי ציון לדור ודור הללויה לדור ודור לדור ודור לדור ודור נגיד לך לדור ודור לדור ודור לדור ודור נגיד God לך ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש קדושתך נקדיש ושבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד לדור ודור L'tor vador, l'tor vador, nagid God lecha. L'tor vador, l'tor vador, l'tor vador, nagid God lecha. Il melech gadol v'kadosh ata, v'kadosh ata. Il melech gadol v'kadosh ata, v'kadosh ata. Baruch atah Adonai, ha'el hakadosh. Yismechu v'malachutecha, Shomrei, Shomrei, Shomrei Shabbat, V'korei oneg Shabbat. Yismechu v'malachutecha, Shomrei, Shomrei, Shomrei Shabbat, V'korei oneg Shabbat. Aha, Mekadesh li Shabbat, Kulam yisbehu, v'tanegu mituvecha Shabbat. Yismechu v'malachutecha, Shomrei, Shomrei, Shomrei Shabbat, V'korei oneg Shabbat. Yismechu v'malachutecha, Shomrei, Shomrei, Shomrei Shabbat, V'korei oneg Shabbat. V'hashvi ratzita bo v'kidashto Shabbat. Kamdat yamim utokarta zecher l'maseh v'reshit Shabbat. Yismechu v'malachutecha, Shomrei, Shomrei, Shomrei Shabbat, V'korei oneg Shabbat. Yismechu v'malachutecha, Shomrei, Shomrei, Shomrei Shabbat, V'korei oneg Shabbat. Ikadav ikadash shemei Rabbi, Yamad Irakirutei, V'yamlich Malchutei, B'chayachon, V'yomechon, V'chayed Kol Beit Yisrael, V'agal Uvizman Kari V'yimeru. Amen. V'hei Shmei Rabbi Mevorach, Le'olam Olam Le'olam Yitbarach, יתברך וישתבח ויפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ותעלה שמי דקודשה לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דמירן ויעלמה ויאמרו תתקבל צלות כל נבוא כל נבוא ישראל קדם אבו כל נביא שמעיה ויאמרו יהי שלמה רבה מן שמעיה וחיים עלינו ויעקול ישראל ויאמרו עושה שלום במרומיו הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו
אין כאלוהינו, אין כאלוהינו, בורא מלכנו, אין כמושיענו, מי כאלוהינו, מי כמלכנו, מי כמושיענו. No God Eloheinu, no God Eloheinu, no God Eloheinu, Baruch Eloheinu, Baruch Baruch Moshiach, Atohu Lageheinu,
We rise 183.
Aleinu l'shabeach la'adon ha'kol v'atei kedula yosef reshit shelo asanu v'goyei haratzot v'lo samanu k'mishpachot ha'adama shelo samchalkenu kahem v'gor aleinu k'ol hamonam אנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוצר הארץ בשמיים ממעל ושכינתו זו בגבי מרומים הוא אלוהינו אמת מלכנו אל זולתו הכתוב בתורתו ידעת היום אשר פוצה אל לבבך כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ממעל הארץ מתחת עינו. ככתוב בתורתך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, ונאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ. היום ההוא, יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו
On this Shabbat, Beth Israel congregation remembers the Yortzites of, among others, David Abramson, Selma Apple, David Barr, Barbara Braden, Shmuel Carmi, Sonia Conway, Shoshana Epstein, Abraham Fair, Ed Field, Morris Fligiel, Isidore Friedman, Rabbi Herschel Garden, Jenny Gerber, Henry Gershowitz, William Gilman, Jacob Nathaniel Gluckman, Sam Lieber, Evelyn Levine, Claire Levy, Ruth Annette Marcus, Naomi Ruth Meislish, Gladys Miller, Evelyn Millman, Joseph Millman, Robin Musket, Maxwell Pitkin, Martin Pitt, Marcel Pollock, Yetta Rush, Richard Singer, Ethel Siskind, Marvin Spector, Carol Trainer Stein, Fanny Stolarski, Wanda Jean Thomas, and Ralph Weil. As we continue to say Kaddish for Victor Rosenberg, Doris Doctor, Lorraine Nadelman, Ruth Neiman Gray, Elaine Stoller, Natalie Scher, Philip Brader, Susan Feingold Schultz, Judith Cashton, Lorraine Sherman, Michael Adams, Leona Leon, Phyllis Werbel, Fanchen Lessing, Carol Feinerman, David Fallman, Bruce Thal, and Carol Amster. For those reciting, please rise and recite along with me on page 184. Yikadal v'yikadash shemei Rabba, v'yalma divra kirute v'yamlich malchute, v'chayechon uvyomechon uv'chaye dechol Beit Yisrael, v'agala v'zman kari v'imru amen. Yehe shmei Rabba mevarach v'olam v'lamel maya, yiparach v'yishtabach v'yipa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal shmei dekudesha richu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran v'yalma v'imru amen. Yehe shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. May their memories continue to bring blessings to this world. Shabbat shalom. Just a quick answer to a question you're not asking, which is, you may have heard there were multiple names I just read that I also read last Shabbat. And the reason is that it's become a common custom that we use here and also preceded my coming, a custom I'm familiar with at other synagogues, which is if the Yortzeit falls on a Friday, we read both the Shabbat before and the Shabbat following, because some people consider Friday an Erev Shabbat and they want to say it during that Shabbat. So I just want to let you know that if that's ever an issue, you'll realize, how can you have a Yortzeit 2 weeks in a row? Usually means the Yortzeit fell on Friday. I want to thank Patty so much for sharing her experience, and also, I feel bad I'm not doing more of that work myself, and it means a lot to me to be in community with people like you and others here at JFS. I see Ellen, who's the incoming president of JFS. I see Mira has been doing this work for years. I bet there are others who are here as well. But to feel like I'm in community with people who are fulfilling Torah, and not always the Torah I'm fulfilling on a daily basis. I hope I can take a piece of Torah that helps you, and you're certainly doing so much Torah that helps me. If you want to talk more about what you can do for refugees, first of all, you can talk to Mira, you can talk to Patty after services, and also Mira's son, I'm drafting you. Ishai is having his, what do you call it, the rebar mitzvah? Bin mitzvah. The bin mitzvah. Since the first one was on Zoom, Ishai will be back on the Bima as the bin mitzvah. And but I like rebar, reminds me of building, I don't know. And the rebar. So, and maybe we can talk a little bit more about refugees at that time. And I also suspect, since refugees occurs 37 or perhaps 47 or 48 times, that it's going to be coming up again. And maybe other people will be connecting to that part of Torah and sharing pieces with us to keep this process going. I want to let you know that, first of all, I want to thank everyone who's been coming in person and people who are coming by streaming. But if this is, I don't want to jinx anything, but this is a time where it feels like sometimes the sun is out a little more, maybe it's a little warmer, maybe certain kinds of awful metrics are going down in the right direction. You almost have to be a Nachshon ben Aminadav at some point, sometimes, to say, I think I'm ready to try to be comfortable in person. And I hope you'll try to do that here. There are people today I see I haven't seen in a while, and it changes things. Like I know that for those who are singing in person, I can actually hear their voices, like when we're davening, and it's so sweet. So may we be the braided challah, the braided Havdalah candle, the braided voices together here in person. And it's not to diminish in any way those who are joining us by streaming, but for those who are streaming, if you're like, maybe I'll make that trip. We have so much coming up to do that for. Not only an amazing amount of B'nai Mitzvah coming up soon, but next weekend, maybe that's the time for you, because Deborah Sachs-Mintz will be here. So I'm gonna, please look at the description. I'll go out after Shabbat in a special email to remind you of the things she's doing. And the Rosenberg Scholar in Residence Weekend, especially meaningful. This is the first weekend we've had where we're saying Kaddish for Vic, instead of saying how's the challah and the luncheon to Vic. And so it's especially meaningful and sweet to bring in music and inspiration, which is what Vic brought to us, and the inspiration he got from his father. So Deborah Sachs-Mintz this coming week, Thursday night at 6:30 p.m., there'll be an online minyan at special time at 6:30. So at 7, those who are here in person, she'll be doing Leading from the Center, a davening workshop, guiding learners in an exploration, not just of technical skills, but strategies for effectively building and sustaining community through davening. If you ever lead a part of the service or think you'd like to lead a part of the service, then this is for you. What does it mean to lead? What does it mean to feel it? What does that mean to be an incredibly positive experience? It's a masterclass for daveners, but those who lead services, but also the novices. And that's only in person. Then Friday, March 4th at 5:30 p.m., an hors d'oeuvre reception, which is probably only 10 minutes of hors d'oeuvres, because I want to hear Deborah teach as soon as she can. She'll be doing something called Boi Kala Shabbat HaMalka, Singing in the Divine. This is this Friday, 5:30 p.m. Through an exploration of singing as a spiritual practice, we'll learn new melodies, reconnect with familiar sounds, and ready ourselves to Shabbat. And that movement, like a yoga class, like a meditation, goes directly into 6:30 p.m., the beginning of Kabbalat Shabbat and Mariv services, which she'll be leading. On Saturday, she'll be leading many parts of the service, not all of them, here on Saturday morning. And she'll give the Devar Torah. Then we'll have lunch. And at 1 p.m., she'll be doing a teaching session called Singing Through the Sea, Lamenting at the River, Song Narratives in Tanakh. And that'll be a teaching here, and that'll be streamed. So Friday night will be streamed, Saturday morning streamed like we're streaming now. Saturday afternoon, she'll be teaching, and we'll be streaming like I do when I teach after services, but I hope you'll join us in person. And 7:30 p.m., a Havdalah concert in Malava Malka. We'll bid farewell to Shabbat and song and keep the Ruach going with an evening of spiritual music. And that I especially recommend, if possible, to be in person for. So that's all coming up next weekend. Soon enough after that, we'll be having our joint Purim of Beth Israel and Temple Beth Emeth. And that will begin with a living Mcgill walk and children's activities on Sunday, the 13th of March from 2:30 to 4 o'clock in County Farm Park. If you don't want to see Rabbi Josh and Rav Nadav and others of us dressed up in characters, if you don't want to see us turning blue, I suggest get there closer to 2:30 than to the 4, because I may say, you know what, as Mordechai, I'm just telling you, listen to someone else, I gotta go. So come hear us play characters in the forest. There'll also be activities for kids, of course, at that time at County Farm Park, Sunday, March 13th. And then Wednesday, the 16th of March, this time we'll do it at the Beth Emeth Sanctuary. If we decide to be together in the future, we'll be back here. But at Temple Beth Emeth this year, costumes encouraged. There will be, starting at 6:30 p.m., Megillah selections with the Purim spiel, followed by the full traditional Megillah reading. And stay tuned for those announcements. Tomorrow, before any of this takes place, BIC reads The Sum of Us, tomorrow at 1 p.m. If you ask yourself what's the common denominator in the 2008 housing bust and the rise in student debt and the decline in America's infrastructure, what are the critical assumptions about access, opportunity, wealth, and power? You are invited to engage in this discussion with Beth Israel Reads, convening tomorrow, Sunday, 1 p.m., February 27th. If you are in the 7th grade or in my B'nai Mitzvah cohort, tomorrow is the next session of Journeys, which will be held here. I'll be here chatting with people starting at 10, and then the 7th graders will, or those who are in the proper period for Bar Bat Mitzvah or Simchat Mitzvah will be joining us at to study together at 10:30 a.m. tomorrow. So with that and other announcements, please keep posted because there's a whole lot coming up. And I thank you for your patience in listening to them. With that, closing song, page 187, Adonolam.
Adonolam asher malach b'terem kol yisir nivra li'ed nasav v'hafsako asar melech shemo nikra, v'acharei kiklot hakol, levado yimlot mara, v'hu haya, v'hu hoveh, v'hu yiyeh, v'tifara, v'hu echad v'yein sheni, l'ham shilo l'hachbira, v'li reishit, v'li taklit, v'lo ha'oz, v'ham yisra, v'hu eli, v'chayko eli, v'tzur chavli b'yetzara, v'hu nisi, u'manas li, menat kursi, v'yom ekra, v'yado avkid ruchi, v'yeitu shan v'yahira.
Let's finish strong.
V'im ruchi k'v'yati, Adonai li, v'ho ira.
Hakim Baruch Adonai Yom HaShavua V'Kedshehu Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Borei Peri Hagafen. Shabbat Shalom and B'tei Avon.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shabbat Shalom. See you.
So we might see Steve tomorrow. So if Mara's here, maybe Steve will come to church. Okay. I hope so too. Thanks for coming. Yeah, I mean, I just want to tell him like the summer days. Thank you. It's been hard to maybe eat up from this. But because I did. We had unfortunately we had someone call and they're in the ICU. No, he's not here. Michael. It's just so you should just about 3 days.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, I know.
You know, I'm starting to see. That's really seriousness of how people it's already I do know that it's not, he's not. A lot of that's also true. Because like it's like everything people this like the circuits, there's a circuit. So you have to brush up on
Well, but the other thing is, the current leader charged a personal friend of treason. And is the godfather of this person's daughter. So I mean, there's a certain amount of political personal animosity going on as well, which is sort of all craziness. But you know, as the leader of the media power group, you sort of have a responsibility, not only a personal peak, determine